Good morning. We are live.
That was so good. I've seen it before. I've seen that whole video compilation before, but it still makes me smile. So that was great.
That's the goal. That's the goal. A little bit of wake you up in the morning. We are broadcasting at 8 a.m. Pacific, but for those of you on the East Coast, you've had plenty of time to roll out of bed, have breakfast and coffee. And then we usually have people that will listen in from different places around the globe. So that's always nice. Trying to keep track of different time zones. I know it's like 4 o'clock, I think, in the UK in the evening. So we have people that join in usually from all over. Like, good morning, Ingrid. So I was looking for my friend last week who usually joins in and says, "Hi, I'm here from Mali." Didn't see that person last week. Maybe they'll be here this week. But I'm Stacey Gordon, and I am the founder and CEO of Rework Work, and my functional title is actually Chief Diversity Strategist. And we spend a lot of time working with organizations, helping them with their diversity, inclusion, equity initiatives, and really moving their organizations forward and looking at ways that they can become more inclusive. We love to create inclusive workplaces. So today I'm excited to invite Creighton, who is with Guided Compass, and actually got introduced to him when he asked me to participate on his board of advisors. And so we have known each other for about a year and a half now, I want to say. I would love if you would introduce yourself to the lovely folks that are joining in from India. I see Chicago, South Africa. Good morning to you all. Love that you are joining us today.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Creighton Taylor. I'm founder and CEO of Guided Compass. We're a technology platform that's basically acts as the on-ramp for typically low-income students to entry-level jobs, internships. And we work in LA, Detroit, and DC right now to help high school, community college, and some four-year college students sort of attend the right events, do some cool projects with employers, and get some internships.
Awesome. So explain kind of what your company does in simple terms for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, in simple terms, we're a matchmaker. We're like an eHarmony for for students and employers. And so, like eHarmony, we're trying to make the right match. We're asking a lot of questions, and we kind of give you these recommendations, and you give us feedback on those recommendations, and then we give you some more recommendations. And so that's, I think, in the grand scheme of things, is what we're kind of about. We're kind of trying to be that matchmaker, but at the same time, we want to help you and give you some tools to be able to improve your chances of making that match with the love that you would like to attract. Let's just say.
Gotcha. And I put your website up on the screen there, so for those that would like to take a look at what he's doing. But right now, most of your jobs, as you said, are in the United States, and you are working with employers in a couple of different states. So I think what's interesting about what you're doing is, she said you're giving individuals tools. And what we found is that there really is a need for students, especially, to get into a job and to get ramped up. Like, gone are the days when we had apprenticeships, right? Gone are the days when you took a job and your job just spent time doing on-the-job training. We don't see that anymore. So what do you see that companies are doing to kind of help new entry-level employees get up to speed?
Yeah. There seems to be a rising movement to bring apprenticeships back, and I think that that's sort of happened in some spaces, but it still has a long way to go. And so, and I think just generally the trends have been to move towards that, because I know a lot of companies, they have very niche skills that they want entry level employees to have, and sometimes schools are not necessarily teaching that. So they want to be able to point students into the right direction, have some, internships have obviously been a big fad and a big way to test students before they hire them full time. But I think the online or ed tech community has really provided a great resource for companies to be able to point students in the right direction to get the skills. Stuff like linked learning, and so I think a lot of companies are able to, and even sort of like Udacity and Udemy and websites like that are kind of marketplaces that allow students to go in on their own if they're interested in a specific field or a specific employer and get some skills.
So like LinkedIn Learning?
Like LinkedIn Learning. So LinkedIn Learning. That's a inside thing. Well, I said LinkedIn Learning, but yes, LinkedIn Learning.
Yes. Well, I know you work with a company called Linked Learning, so we don't want to confuse the audience, right? So Creighton's Guided Compass works with a company called Linked Learning, and you'll explain a little bit more about that as well, right? But so LinkedIn, obviously, most of you are on LinkedIn. LinkedIn Learning has many courses, sort of like Udemy, et cetera, where people can go and get access to a number of different free courses that help you to upskill, right, and to get ready. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want you to explain a little bit about linked learning and how that works.
Yes, sorry. So linked learning, it's a confusing name, very confusing name. But they've been around for about 13 years, and they were founded. They had a very huge grant from a local foundation called the Irvine Foundation, and they basically are a certification body that helps schools, mainly high schools with some community college, certify their programs so that they are training their students to become solid, whatever the field is, designers or engineers or, whatever it is, marketers. And so then the companies are able to say, okay, you're certified either at the silver level or the gold standard, kind of like a ISO, I don't know if you know international standards or the ISO standards or something like that. There's a minimal quality that you're supposed to have graduating that says that you know these certain things, and that would give the employers confidence to hire graduates of those students. So we work with Linked Learning as a partner, and they work with a ton of school districts across the country, hundreds, is my understanding. And so that's just it's a confusing term, but that's what linked learning is and how we work with them.
Gotcha. And so what that does, though, is it helps, to get students, right, as I said before, to sort of upskill, right, and to have some confidence in the employer, from the employer, that this student knows their stuff. Because what I'm seeing is, and I'll go back to LinkedIn Learning because I am, of course, going to plug LinkedIn Learning since I have the resume course on there, right? And what we've seen is Microsoft and LinkedIn. Now Microsoft owns LinkedIn, right? And so they did a huge announcement that provided free access to everyone, not just students, for many of those types of courses that will help you to get ahead. Many of them in the technical fields. And one of those courses is the resume course that I have on LinkedIn Learning. So what you find is that a lot of times individuals are not aware of the resources that are out there. And there are a lot of really great resources, many of them free, many of them very low cost, that can help you get to that next level. And so we rely on our institutions, our high schools and our colleges to provide us with the experience and the skills that we need to get ahead. But really what those things are, in my view, is just a container, right? They're just sort of like the checkbox that says, okay, yes, I got a high school degree. Yes, I got a high school diploma. Yes, I got a college degree. But what you do during that time, like never before has there been such an opportunity for people to really move forward and find and create their own path. So I think that's what's really great. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about today as well, is giving people the resources, putting them at your fingertips, and having you share those resources, right? Because as Neha says, she wasn't aware of these free resources. Many people are not. They just don't know that they're out there. And especially you're talking, Crichton, about, students and lower socioeconomic individuals who don't necessarily know that these things exist. And so I think part of what I would like to be able to do is increase awareness, because the more knowledge that you have, right, the more choices you can have. And I find that especially in lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, people don't have choice because they don't know. They do not know what's available to them. And I believe it was last week we were talking about like the different types of jobs that we usually, when I say we, people of color, usually think are available to them. And it's a very small bucket of jobs. And so
Right.
what I think is great about what your platform does is it opens up those jobs, right? So what kind of jobs do you usually see in the platform?
Well, yeah. I mean, so we're really an end to end from career exploration all the way to preparing to getting specific work experience and getting feedback. And as a result of that, we actually provide, so you can take some career assessments, interest, personality. You can kind of do a skills assessment as well. And we actually give recommendations on careers. We have over 1,000 careers in the database that we literally recommend. Where high schoolers typically will kind of go in and check it out and favorite some of them and talk about them in class. So it works as a career exploration tool as well. And there's always just like a huge wide-eyed, sort of eye-opening experience of all the opportunities that are kind of out there, because that I know that subset for a fact is not all the careers out there. So there's just I still don't know of all the careers that are out there, and so the ability to kind of dive into maybe a subset of those that might be a good match and have a conversation about that, I think is really really great. Um, and so there's that component, and then we actually kind of we do the matching to companies components, and that really ranges tremendously. We have partners. Our College to Congress is one of our partners. They focus on getting internships on Capitol Hill, and there's a huge effort to get more minorities and women into government roles, which I think has largely been it's been one-sided, I think, in terms of the representation there, both on the Democratic and Republican side. So, but obviously, I think on the Republican side, it's been tremendously one-sided. And so, I think for the College of Congress is focused specifically on low-income students, getting some more diversity in there. United LA and Bixel Exchange, Bixel Exchange is focused is part of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. They're focused on tech. So when I say tech, I mean the tech industry, which really is everything. So sales and marketing and operations all kind of fall into that, even though software engineering is obviously a huge backbone of that component. United LA focuses on health as well and all these other. So we really kind of run the gamut. I know in California, there's actually 55 standardized pathways that all pathway programs have to connect to, that really kind of are a mix of industry and function. And we kind of, our clients are in all those pathways. And the triple the schools, they're in all these different pathways. So
Right.
we actually work usually with what's called a work-based learning coordinator or staff in the school that focus by pathway to help connect students to opportunities within that pathway.
This is really great. So, I mean, and Carol's making some good points, right, about tech and just the plethora of jobs that are available. And people, when they say tech, they immediately think coding, but there
Yeah.
are so many different types of jobs available. And to your point, you were saying, you can't know all the jobs that are out there. Jobs are being created. People are coming up with different types of jobs. I would never have guessed when I was in high school that I would make money by creating content for an online platform that would teach hundreds of thousands of people around the globe.
Yeah.
Right? Like that just wasn't a job that even existed at that time. So a lot of, I think, what's really important, we have to start really helping people to understand, is that the more exploration you do, the more your mind, gets to really start to look at what the different opportunities can be and start to pull the different pieces together. And so, something else you said is like, how can employers think about diversifying their workforce? Like there is a big push right now, finally, so what we talk about, that companies are saying, yes, we know we need to do better. So let's help them do better. Like what can companies do now to really focus in on diversifying their workforce?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a really difficult and complicated problem because there's literally laws in place around around you can't discriminate based on race and gender and religion, all these things. But at the same time, we want to be able to have the business case to be able to diversify. So in my mind, I think there's several levels, maybe three levels that companies kind of take. One is, hey, we just need a diverse candidate for the sake of hiring a diverse candidate because we want to have good PR. We want to have good public relations and show that we have some representation. That's not ideal. I think level two is where, okay, maybe we're a consumer packaged goods company and we want to have more representation in the Black community, more Black consumers or more buyers or Latino consumers or buyers. That we hire someone who focuses on that market. And that's maybe a little better, but again, not ideal. I think the ideal situation is maybe this tier three where you're hiring somebody because they bring something different to the conversation and they're able to mix in ideas that are things that people really haven't thought about before. And so this kind of goes into this diversity of thought idea. And so I think, when companies look at what they can do, I think there's one level of they can recruit, I think, with diversity platforms and diversity organizations and get some diverse talent in there. But I think they should also, I think more important to me is to run experiments and to hire people from different kind of groups and see how they work in teams and how their performance performance differs, particularly in the ideation space phasing.
Right.
Because I think,
Well,
yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the part of that people that needs to happen, right, is yes, you're going to hire people from different backgrounds, different race, ethnicities, genders, etc., right? But you don't just sort of throw everyone into a room and go, okay, go ideate, right? Like this is where companies are supposed to be helping their employees to understand how to work better together, right? And providing them with that guidance, providing them with the tools that they need to perform as teams. And what we're finding, especially at Rework Work, as we're going into companies, there is a lack of trust within organizations, right? I don't trust my coworker. I don't care what color you are. I don't trust you because the environment hasn't been created in such that we can trust one another. And when you don't have trust, you can't even get to diversity because that there's so many underlying issues within organizations that it's one of the reasons that people say, well, diversity is difficult. It's difficult because you're trying to do it on top of a system that's already broken.
Right.
So many times we have to fix the foundation first, and then everything else. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like
Right.
there's certain baseline things that we have to take care of before we can get to enjoying our job. Right? If I come to work and I don't have a computer, I don't have the tools and the technology that I need, if my coworkers are stealing my ideas or are not including me in meetings, right? I'm not ideating. I don't have time to sit around and help make the workplace better, right?
Right. Right.
So those are some of the issues I think that companies have to start looking at is, it's all of those things, and we have to really start with foundational, which is one of the reasons some of the things we end up doing is going in and looking at that, right?
Yeah, totally. It sounds like you're getting at this inclusion part and ethical part that is inevitably it's necessary for you to be able to even start to look at diversity at a high level, because people need to value diversity at an individual level. They need to be able to listen and open their minds to different ways of thinking. And if they're not able to do that, if they're always going to be, I want to have a mentee that looks and speaks like me. I want to hang out with people who are exactly like me, just because that makes life easier. Then it's just not going to work, because you're going to constantly recruit these groups, and the leaders of the organization are going to constantly attract people who, and obviously the people who are underneath the leadership want to please and impress the leadership. So you're going to have this sort of constant groupthink, which
Right.
ultimately is not going to be what. And you'll see when tons of case studies. That's what leads to organizations getting completely destroyed by competitors, or allows other products to sort of surface. So I think that, yeah, there's definitely needs to be a training and a focus on hiring the right people that do value diversity, that do value inclusion, that do value ethics of not stealing ideas. I mean, that's a huge demotivator. I mean, if you get some ideas stolen, I don't think you're going to be working for the next
Right. Well,
ever.
and it's
So
well, and like you said, diversity of thought is a it's something that people will hold on to. They'll say, yes, diversity of thought, I can do. Right, like that one's easy.
yeah,
And I say, let's remember that diversity of thought will come when you have diversity of gender, when you have diversity of race and ethnicity, when you have diversity of ability, of age, of socioeconomic background. When you have that kind of diversity of thought will come. But if you start with trying to just do diversity of thought, you end up saying things like, you can have 10 blue eyed, blonde haired men in a room and have diversity of thought. And it's like, no. Right? Like that's how you end up in these echo chambers where everyone is kind of still thinking the same. And it's like, well, because one guy came from the Netherlands and one guy came from the United States, we've got diversity of thought. And it's like, yes, but no. You've kind of like missed the point, right, of what diversity really should be.
yeah. I see a lot of. I mean, it's obviously it's a very trendy thing for a lot of larger companies to hire chief diversity officers. But I've had a lot of conversations with them. But I think I kind of come back to, I would love case studies. That's what I would love. I would love case studies that hire people who are black, brown, yellow, whatever you want to call, whatever, different creeds, and people with different socioeconomic backgrounds and genders, and put these people into teams and actually have case studies and write and publish this stuff. Because right now it's just this black box. And I think that there's a lot of talk, but a lot of little action to like drive things forward where you can see results. And
Right.
and I think that's the biggest piece that's missing is, how do we incentivize businesses with actual data that's like, okay, like this is what, and I think we have some case studies, but they're often from an academic standpoint, and they're not usually from a business standpoint. And
Right.
and the most of the academic case studies point to this whole diversity thing is, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense for generating new ideas. And I think it's logical that it makes sense. But it'd be great if we have some of our leading companies publishing some of this stuff, so it can drive.
Well, the issue is that a lot of the leading companies that are publishing, so if I pick on, I can't remember if it was Google or Apple or one of the top tech ones, right? They would show, if they started with, we're going to show what our demographics look like, and we know it's terrible, and we're going to try to move, right? So they put that out. But what they have not really done, and they're trying, right? But what they haven't really done is, as you said, is that action. Now, I go back to a comment I made earlier, which is that it is very difficult for people to get to diversity, and me respecting my Black coworker or my, female coworker when I don't respect people in general, right? So if you look at, for example, the Me Too movement, that is a complete lack, right, of respect for women in the workplace. So if I am somebody who could potentially sexually harass my coworker, what do you think I'm doing to everyone else, right? I have a lack of respect for other people and for their person. So part of what, and people want to say, well, it's not the employer's job to have to police people, right? You're supposed to come to work with your morals intact. That would be great. We would love it, right? But at the end of the day, as an employer, you are responsible for your workplace and you're responsible for the behaviors in the workplace. And so when one or two bad things happen in the organization, the company wants to say, because of course they want to limit liability, they want to say that that was one bad apple that did this thing and that we fired that bad person and they're gone. But what they don't want to do is look at the systems and the procedures and the policies that they had in place that allowed that bad action to fester, right? Because that's what they actually have to look at. And that's the part that's difficult because it really does mean that we have to change the way that companies work. It's one of the reasons our company is called Rework Work, right? Because you literally have to change the policies, the procedures. You have to look at what is happening in the workplace. And companies are finally starting to get that. They're realizing that changing it doesn't mean that you're throwing everything out. It doesn't mean that you're telling everyone who works there that they're bad, right? Or that your systems are wrong. It just means that we have to look at what systems might allow for these kinds of actions to happen and how do we potentially stop them before they start, right? And that's where we talk about like things like psychological safety. How do we make it safe for somebody to speak up and say, no, Creighton, what you just said is not accurate. We should not say that. We should not do that. That was demeaning. We're not going to make Stacey be the person who takes notes in every single meeting as the secretary, right? We're not going to have her fetch coffee and sit in the corner and not be able to participate in this meeting, right? But workplaces have to get to a place where they can comfortably have those conversations. That I can raise my hand and say, this is wrong, and others can say, you know what, let's talk about it, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, no, I completely agree with everything.
I know, I went on a rant. I'm sorry. I went on a rant.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. For my part, I,
I do that. I'm sorry. It's like, I get so like fired up because I'm like, no, we will fix this. Like, it's not difficult. We can do this.
I think
Oh my goodness.
I think you are doing a great job of doing your part at fixing it, and I hope that I can contribute as to some degree. I mean,
Well, I think that's what your platform does, right? Like your platform is is giving an entry point for people who didn't necessarily have that previously, right? And
right.
you're helping people, like you said, tools, they're getting access, they're getting their minds opened to different jobs that they weren't even aware of, right?
Yes.
So I think it's a really cool thing that you're doing.
No, I appreciate that. I guess when I think when I keep going to this case because I was asking these diversity officers about these things because what I like to set up is that when we have gaps, so we have these case studies, we know okay, what seems to work in terms of diversity environment, and then we can find out where the gaps are, and then we can have companies put in those preferences when they hire. And then that will allow them to hire through Guided Compass to fill those gaps more reliably from a performance standpoint. And so that way we're able to fill those gaps that way. That's kind of my take on it, and how I would love to be able to sort of to bridge that gap where employers are winning, but also candidates are winning, and you're getting the more of a diverse pool in there. How you can build your skills and impress an employer, but the fact that you've come from a different way of thinking, a different background, is actually an advantage.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. I think then, so how can employers uh, work with you?
Yeah, so that depends, I suppose, on where they are, but I think in LA, our primary partner is Unite LA, and so if you're an employer or a student, who's I think most of our students are between 16 and 24 right now. Um, they would probably go to guidedcompass.com/partner/unite-LA. And that has both a student side and an employer side on that landing page that talks about our partnership with Unite LA. Unite LA is a nonprofit that focuses on bridging that gap. They're our programmatic partner, and they kind of do all the nuts and bolts of planning events, doing mock interviews with students, helping kind of bringing employers on board, referring students to employers, getting feedback, all the hard work that we are not doing. But we kind of are the platform that powers that. And so I think for our at LA, that's how employers and students would get involved. And then I think it's kind of a case by case basis in other markets as we kind of roll out. Detroit is with the Detroit public school system. College of Congress is with specifically an industry. So it kind of depends. But in LA, we're pretty broad.
Yeah. Okay. That's wonderful. So if you work at a school and you want to get your students hired, then reach out to Creighton and he will help you, or he'll at least point you in the right direction. And let's see what we can do to get more students into some broad-based jobs. And, because really my goal at the end of the day is to never, ever, ever, ever hear an employer say, I can't find a qualified fill in the blank, right? So I like what you're doing, Creighton, because I feel like you're helping to create that pipeline of students that turn into great employees, and that's what we need right now.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you joining me today, Creighton. I really do. And it's always good to connect and chat. And so for those of you that love to tune in, we'll be back again next week, 8 a.m. Pacific. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I appreciate it.
All right.